Hey guys, this is Jay Calder with Jay Unboxing, here giving you my personal prediction for Tszyu versus Takeshi Inoue. And as always, this is just my take. Your prediction can be left down in the comments section below. Would love to hear them all. Also, a disclaimer, there's a 100% chance that I am butchering Takeshi Inoue's name, so just forgive me on that. We'll move on. Act like it's never happening, alright? Anyway, getting into a little bit of fight info here. We have Tszyu versus Takeshi Inoue. The venue is the Kudos Bank Arena at Sydney Olympic Park in New South Wales, Australia. There's no broadcasters over here, but I believe it's on some kind of pay-per-view system over in Australia. Not totally sure on that. Taking place in the junior middleweight division. No title on the line, but of course, both of them have decent enough kind of recognition on the sport, especially Tim, of course, that with the win, you could certainly see their careers advancing in a much more positive way, so something on the line to some degree. Tszyu is looking to keep climbing up the rankings, while the tough, durable Inoue is looking for a signature win to launch his own career. He's had kind of an up and down career in the sense that the one time he stepped up against Jaime Munguia, while it was a very competitive fight in my mind, it was one that he certainly clearly lost. At the same time, this can all be erased with a solid win over a son of a legend in Tszyu. So the odds might claim this fight is incredibly wide. I think it's a compelling enough fight that it's worth a breakdown. So let's get into it. Starting with Inoue here, I think the first thing you need to do is make sure don't allow Tszyu to breathe on the inside. Now, that doesn't mean nothing but body shots. It doesn't mean just smothering his work for the sake of it and not being productive yourself. What it means is attacking the body. What it means is getting in close and making sure you're taking away some of Tszyu's power, who might be the slightly harder puncher out of the pair of them. It also means, though, pressing him, pushing him, trying to pull him into deep waters and seeing if he can actually still breathe there. This is something that Tszyu really hasn't been tested on. To some degree, Tszyu has been tested more in the chin department, though that will be tested as well in this fight, in my opinion. But he really hasn't been tested in the way of if someone's there and continuing to press on and not being completely just, bombed away by his punches, how will Tszyu respond in the 7th, 8th, 9th round of a very competitive, or at the very least pushing a fight that's punishing him? And this is going to be something that Inoue himself is going to have to find out. I would also say look for the overhand right. They're about the same size as it pertains to dimensions. There's not really much there, but I will say that Takeshi is going to be one of those guys that doesn't necessarily jab his way in all the time. That can be a bad thing because it means you're going to eat some leather, and he might definitely do that in this fight. However, I think it can benefit him in one way, and that is by throwing that overhand right in a way that's kind of harder to time because there's not that setup shot like a jab usually is there for a lot of people. So it's in there. It's in your system already. Use it to your advantage. This is the way you throw that overhand right. Make sure you do it. Sometimes feint, sometimes throw a jab. Kind of mix it up to some degree, but ultimately step in, throw that overhand right, and have some success with it. He's done that in the past against multiple opponents, and it's going to be something that if he can get going against Tszyu, it could be effective. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, test the chin of Tszyu early and often. If he's just trying to go to the body to smother him, it might work, but it might not. If he's just trying to, land the occasional overhand right or is a little timid in there, it's not going to work. He's going to have to throw shots where he can land them. Tszyu's a kind of wily guy when it comes to his defense. If he overcommits, he can be hit. But if he's actually looking for the shots and taking his time and trying to set things up, he can actually be a bit more defensively minded than people give him credit for. Inoue has to take that away from him by throwing those shots consistently, meaning that eventually 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 or 20, however many he's willing to throw, are going to get through. And then you're going to be able to see whether or not Inoue has the sort of power that might trouble Tszyu and that might ultimately win the Japanese fighter this fight. Now for Tszyu, I think he needs to land to the body on the inside, and this is for a couple of reasons. I think he's just a naturally stronger guy, so he's not going to necessarily be able to put all of the extension on his shots inside that he'd like to. But a way you can sort of negate that is by going to the body. You still get to extend to some degree if you can create a little extension on the inside, and that's going to push your man back a bit more. That's going to zap some of the fight out of him in a way. And this will, of course, mean that he goes back a little more, back a little more, back a little more, and suddenly he's not on the inside. This can then benefit Tszyu, who, of course, is going to want to step in with that 1-2 and that solid right hand that he has, making sure that he can land. And if he can push his man back to begin with by punishing him to the body body, which of course naturally drops the guard anyway, you will have a much better chance if you're Tim Tszyu of landing the sort of power shots you're looking to land. I would also say don't load up on your shots. Again, this is kind of a little bit of an offset of that first point for Tszyu, but ultimately you don't want to get so carried away of trying to put in some great performance or that you have to knock this man out. No, at a certain point you need to tame him, you need to control him, you need to set your work up and then try to take him out. That does not mean loading up on your shots. It does not mean getting him out of there faster. This does not really even mean in the middle of the fight certainly trying to be better than a Jaime Munguia, for example, by being able to stop him when Munguia only won by a decision. You want to do what's best for you in this fight. And for me, for Tszyu, that means he wants to set his work up, take his time, and in the later rounds, stoppages might come or they might not. But ultimately, if you're doing this correctly, you're still in a position to win the fight. Of course, when you're not loading up on your shots and they're coming a lot more naturally, that tends to be when you knock the guy out anyway. And finally, control the fight with the jab. Tszyu is going to be the one that's probably a little more schooled here. Inoue is not a bad fighter by any means, but he can get a little wild. He can get a little bit more over the top with how he's going to push in a fight. Tszyu needs to be able to control him. That jab needs to tame him, and he needs to be able to do that from an early point. As I mentioned, for Inoue, he's going to want to try and test his chin early. I think that's what he needs to do to win. For Tszyu, he needs to make sure that that jab is keeping that away. That's basically just neutralizing that attempt. And over time, that will allow for Tszyu to actually land his own shots. That'll allow for him, again, when he does get on the inside, that he's not making, in a way, he's not just making headway without having to pay for it. He's getting a jab in there. When he is inside, he's getting hit to the body. And eventually, he isn't going to want to come in as much because you've ultimately made him pay for it every single time. And for Tszyu to be successful, I think that is one of the most important keys for him in this fight. Now, while the odds are wide for Tim Tszyu, this fight is much closer to me. I'm not sitting here necessarily saying that Tim Tszyu is going to lose this fight. I'm certainly not saying I'm quite brave enough to pick Inoue, but it's a very competitive fight in my opinion. This is Inoue as an opponent that is good for a rising fighter like a Tim Tszyu, someone that you could really kind of check to see where he's at this point in his career. Still, again, not quite brave enough to pick Inoue, and that's for a couple of reasons. One, I actually think Tszyu is a solid fighter and has taken shots well and has won fights well and has shown up in his biggest fights against a guy like a Jeff Horn, for example. He's done well in these sorts of fights, and I think he can continue to do so. But also, unless Inoue can win via knockout, and again, Tszyu has shown a decent chin, it's hard to imagine he gets a fair decision down under to begin with. So it's difficult to pick him. Still, Inoue will have his moments. Early on, both will have to jockey for their position, and Inoue is going to press and look to test the resolve and the chin of Tszyu, and his chin will be tested. However, Tszyu will settle things down with head movement, again, that's a little underrated for him, and a decent jab. And as the fight wears on, Tim will control the action much more, jabbing, landing the big right hand behind it as well. And while he might hurt Inoue, I think Takeshi sees the final bell, but only to lose a decision. So my pick here, of course, is Tim Tszyu via comfortable, unanimous decision. And as I mentioned, the odds for this fight are a little wider than I would think they should be. You have Tszyu coming in at a minus 1100 with Inoue at a plus 590. Now, do I think that Inoue is going to win this fight again? No. Do I understand the odds to some degree? I suppose. But by the end of this fight, I think we're going to look at it and say these odds made the fight seem like it was going to be a lot less close than it actually was. It's just one of those things where I don't know if I could suggest anyone lay some money on Inoue by any means, but I do think it'll be a close fight, and if you're looking to call an underdog shot, by all means, something that you could possibly do. I do think Tszyu ends up winning like I predicted here, but again, I think it's a little closer than those odds suggest. Of course, I said this, and now Tszyu's going to blow him out in one round or something, but to be honest, that would greatly surprise me, much more than if this fight was just close or compelling, because I do think Inoue is a decent fighter, and again, we'll see on the night, but I do think it'll be a closer fight, or at least a competitive one. In any event, my prediction record heading into this fight is 41-16-3 with 12 exact, but let me know what you guys think. You excited for this fight? Think it's going to be a close one like I am, or are you kind of in favor of the odds here? Love to hear your thoughts on that. Please let me know all your kind of bets, predictions, so on and so forth. Please be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and follow at jcalderon_JOB, and you can email me at jonboxing@gmail.com. Love to hear from you there. Also, be sure to check out jonboxing.com for schedule, results, betting odds, rankings, and more. And as always, Until next time.